Axioms on Trial. All right, everybody. See ya. All right, I was just kidding. I've just always really wanted to do that. I don't know why. So anyway, I am J Mike. This is Cease to Know. We are going to get back into our kind of normal schedule of breaking down clips on different apologists. We did Inspiring Philosophy. I'm losing names now. William Lane Craig and Sean McDowell, and I think a few others. Cease, what do you maybe fill people in on our knowledge of the clips that we're about to share and whatnot while I fix my audio issues?
So we haven't really, we're kind of easing back into things after taking some time to, for being to work in school and you were doing other things. So I haven't really watched any of these clips ahead of time. Which sometimes, I think it's important that we try to prepare more, usually, but sometimes it's fun to kind of go the improv route. I know we both play music. I don't know what your experience is with improv.
Oh, you cut out.
Improvisation with music. It's just kind of go in the moment.
You cut out, but I assume what you said was how I feel about improvisation, which is actually really great that you said that, because I'm one that, like, if I have to stick to something or a specific script or something like that, I can do it. But with music, it's like if I'm supposed to play a specific piece, it's definitely harder for me than it is for me to improvise. And so someone will be like, "Damn, those blues licks were tasty. How did you learn that?" I'm like, well, I'm just applying techniques that I already know, and I'm just going through the motions, and it's much easier than learning a very specific lick, because you have certain articulation and things like that you have to worry about. Whereas improv, you can get away with people not really knowing that it was improv.
Exactly. So no, I feel the same way. By the way, just for the people listening and you as well, I'm having like severe lag issues right now. So if I cut out or if I don't respond right away, I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with my computer. I think I might be getting a new one next week. But I've been having a lot of those issues. So, but that said, we haven't really looked at these videos before. Before we jump into it, I do want to comment on a couple of things. One was the conversation that we had last week with the Idealist.
Yeah.
And one was your, yet again, hilarious trolling of Darth Dawkins.
That was Frank and Henry. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that was so great. So I guess let me start by talking about the last conversation that we had. Can you hear me okay now?
I can hear you fine. Yeah, you just had that one lag.
Okay, so I want to start by saying that I like those guys, and I hope they come back. And I encounter, especially on Discord, a lot of really just awful pseudo intellectuals who you can tell haven't actually studied any philosophy whatsoever. And I don't think that those guys are part of that kind of group.
Sure.
I think that there's definitely more to what they're trying to say. So they have my respect as far as that is concerned, and they seem like nice people, and I would love to converse with them again in the near future. I will, however, say a few things that I think it's important, and I know I struggle with this as well sometimes, to articulate concepts in a way that is accessible to people.
Sure.
And it's something that I'm trying to get better with. And I do also think that there are certain philosophical concepts that one can't just express in sound bites. It requires a level of awareness of background texts and to put in the work to get the full context of what's being said.
Agreed. Yeah.
That said, I've been reading philosophy since I was 15. I'm 32 now, and if I have trouble having any clue what you're talking about, because of the language that you're using, even if you have something real there to say and something deep there to express, there's a problem with communication at that point. And so one of the things, for example, someone actually pointed this out in one of the comments on that video. And this comment says, in quotes, he was quoting something that idealist pessimist said in the video. And he said, "I view experience as an atmosphere that is inclusive of that which has as its context." I don't know what that means. And
can you say that again?
Yeah. I view experience as an atmosphere that is inclusive of that which it has as its context. So, I'm not going to say that there isn't a level of substance to what it is that they're trying to express. I hope that for the future they can find a way to translate their message in a way that is accessible to people, especially, because one thing is, I don't have the expectation necessarily people who are not involved in philosophy are going to grasp a lot of this stuff right away. For someone like myself, who's been doing this for a long time, who studied these things, I should at least have some sense of what's being said.
But you walked away from it not really feeling like you had any so let me put it this way. You said at the beginning of the conversation, I'm not really sure what it is you mean by the non-physical, right? Yeah. Did it feel like you walked away with less or more of an understanding of what they mean by that? Because it felt like instead of trending upwards for you and even for myself, and nothing against them, we're gonna have them back on, I feel like it trended downwards because I was in the same boat. I'm told constantly that, hey, if you can find a way to explain it where everybody understands it, it's better. And I agree with that. I use these terms, and I'm not nearly as into the philosophy, at least from the level of reading it since I was 15. I've always been, into philosophy. I didn't get serious about it until later in my life. But I did have an issue that I hope when they come back on to clear up is a lot of the things that they said need to be broken down in a way that I'm not saying for like the audience sake, but even for me and you, it's hard to argue against a point at which feels like it's clouded with a lot of language that just confused myself. It was like, I don't want to attack a point because I might not be attacking the right point because I don't feel like it's succinct enough for me to get. And that I hope is cleared up in the next one. I was really happy to have had the conversation, but I was a little bummed out that I felt like I walked away more confused about their position than I was previously.
And again, let me reinstate, I'm not one of the people who thinks that philosophy can be broken down in sound bites. Like, there are things that are difficult to express, and I myself have trouble expressing some of the ideas that I hold, and I'm trying to get better with that. But there were points in the conversation where I really didn't know what was being said there. And, one of the, I think, we're going to get into some clips now, so I don't want to spend too much time on this right now. But a couple things I do feel like I should mention. The issue of there being a problem for physicalism to say that, he brought up the idea of experiencing your nervous system. There's somehow some contradiction, there's some flaw in physicalism, because how could it be, if it's your nervous system, that it can also be said that I am experiencing your nervous system?
That was the N1 N2 kind of argument that was placed. I looked back over that after the show, but I didn't look into it like I wanted to enough. And he's also sent us stuff on Discord that I still need to look at. But
the error there is assuming that somehow a physicalist approach to reality is denying subjectivity as a limitation. Like, nowhere in my sort of philosophy of physicalism. Am I suggesting that in looking at the brain state, I am experiencing the experience as you have the experience? That's not what I'm arguing for. And like I said, there's a real subjective limitation there. But what the subjective limitation suggests is not, at least as far as I'm concerned, that physicalism is inadequate as an explanation for reality. That doesn't follow from that. And the other thing I wanted to add, and I tried to say that in the conversation, is that it's not an issue of special pleading, because I think the other guest, where I forget the name, but the other guest had said something.
Monistic idealism.
Right. He said, why is it that I had special pleading towards language being limited in the context of talking about consciousness, but not in the context of talking about anything else? And I want to say that is not my view. I think that the limitation of language exists all the way through. In fact, anything that I talk about, I had to talk about through the lens of my consciousness. So there's no reason to assume that the language wouldn't be a problem there, all throughout my experience of reality. So, we'll I think probably at some point maybe do a breakdown of that conversation in more detail. I would love to have those guys back on as well.
I think I want to try to reach out. I still got to read some of the stuff he sent in the Discord. I've had a lot of stuff in my life going on, but I was wanting to get them back on next week if we can. So
that'd be great. Because like I said, they seem like really nice people, and I welcome that kind of conversation. The last thing I want to say too is, whatever flaws of physicalism one might point to doesn't necessarily validate idealism as a position that makes sense. So, I guess I'll leave it at that for now. But like I said, I hope to have them back on soon and maybe clear up some of what it is that we were confused about, and how they would actually define mind. I think is really important, because I feel like I'm not.
Yeah, that was the part I don't feel like we got to, but I don't think that was like a purposefully done in any way, that they avoided that or something. I think we circled around so much that we never really pinned them on that. And I think next time it's something we should do. And I think even the same way that, they probably feel like maybe they didn't pin us on defining the physical. I know I went through my position on it in regards to like, hey, if we're gonna make any room to call this substance or have some distinguish between whether you look at matter as some fundamentally mental thing or I look at it as some fundamentally physical thing, I think the best way for me on that is, okay, well, we have two distinctions in that case, and I'm not in line with the distinction you call mental, and so mind is going to be whatever you say that is almost at the back end of a process or of an evolutionary process, where it gives rise to second order desires and things like that, where we can even have this ability to question it. Thank you, Don Fullman. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes.
If you guys want to support us at all, super chats help us out a lot. And we have two Patreons on patreon.com/actions on trial. Witters Shiz, I can never say his name right. He is one of them, as well as Begin to Exist, I believe. So thank you guys for being our first two Patreons, and thank you, Don, for the donation.
I think it's Begin to Know.
What did I say?
Begin to Exist.
I've been doing a lot on the Kalam lately. That Begin to Exist is just like imprinted into my brain right now, which we'll get into, because I've I think the notion of something beginning to exist is like, I don't think that makes any sense. When you say a carpenter made a table begin to exist, it's like, well, you didn't. You took non-table material like nails and lacquer and wood, and you created a table. That's the only relation of causation that we know of. But anyway, we can get into that in a different show. Did you want to go into the clip, or did I think I cut you off on something?
Well, one last thing I want to, actually two things, but I think I forget one of them. But the one thing I did want to mention, which was a good point that they brought up, which I think needs some clarification, is what is it that I mean when I say space and time? Because he said, well, something exists within space and time. Well, does space and time exist? And like he was pointing out that there is a confusion there with the terms, and there's different ways of looking at that. I think part of it is, those seem to be more like adjectives of that one uses to describe what exists, right? So it's not that space and time are these forms floating about. One point that we got stuck on where we didn't agree was that I don't think there needs to be any other difference between something imaginary and something actually there than the fact that it is actually there. Even if, because he was saying, well, you can have an imaginary object that has all the same properties, but except they're imaginary properties. And he was suggesting there needs to be some other thing to differentiate the two things. Mm-hmm. And my position is no, the only thing that's necessary to differentiate the two is that one actually exists. I don't think there needs to be anything else to separate the two. And so, I think that is connected with how we can define physical. And there's a lot, there's a lot there to unpack, but we'll get to that. We'll revisit that.
Yeah, I would actually love to see your brother's take on that as well. Yeah. Being an astrophysicist. I guess we'll get into the meat of it. I think people came here for a little bit of Sean McDowell, if we can say that with a straight face. We don't really know exactly what videos we're doing. This first one is how does Jesus address evil and suffering? So I hope it's not shitty. I hope there's something of substance. If not, I have a giant list of videos that we're going to try to get through. And so I'll go ahead and bring it up. And we will enjoy the Christian pornography, which is just talking about the Bible and Jesus. So here we go.
This is probably the toughest question that we have to wrestle with, because it's not just intellectual, it's personal. We've experienced pain, we've seen pain, and at times some of us have all felt like, if I was God, I would stop this. Why doesn't God stop it? You have to keep in mind, though, that it's not just Christianity that has to answer the question of pain and suffering. Every single worldview has to make sense of this. So the question is not, can I tell you exactly why you're suffering and answer every single component of the question?
Okay, this is already a dodge. Sure, yeah. If you want to know how other people kind of deal with the problem of evil or the fact that they're suffering in the world, the problem of evil is specifically relating to certain properties that are espoused that the God has, being omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omniscient, if you want to throw that in there. You can only really stick on the main two if you want, but so I don't know. My first take on that, well, I'm sure he'll get into it, but it's funny that when we talk about evil and suffering and the problem of evil, and you're going to address it in the context of Jesus, then I don't see the point of saying, well, here's my tu quoque, like you also have this problem too. It's like, well, yeah, but that's not the topic.
I have no contention with the idea that other worldviews should explain these things away. My thing is, it's way easier from my perspective and my philosophy to explain why there is suffering. It's not really a problem. In fact, it's what you would expect given our circumstances. It's much more of a problem for someone who claims that there's a creator who is perfect, all-powerful, and all-loving. Then what we see doesn't add up to those traits that are being ascribed to this God.
Unless you just redefine all loving to fit the horrible suffering and atrocity.
Yeah, unless you just play a language game where, well, I've just defined anything God does as all loving, in which case you've stripped any kind of meaning away from the actual terminology, and you've just decided, well, I'm going to define God as those things, like synonymously.
But even when you do that, there's a problem, because you're like, it's the old statement, which I think is your biggest pet peeve, which I did an AMA earlier on the ACD Discord, which everyone should go check out, which is the ACA fan run Discord. And someone asked me like what my biggest pet peeves were, and I should have mentioned shoot, now I'm losing my thought. That the idea here that when you take something like a suffering or something and you try to spin it in this way where you're like, well, you have to account for it this way. It's like, yes, but the problem is, it's like you've defined your God in such a way that if you want to go and say, here, I have this, the God is good thing. That's what I wanted to say is my biggest pet peeve, is that when you say God is good, you're saying I have this measurement or this ruler, right? So you're saying like a ruler or a foot long is 12 inches, right? Or whatever. And you're going to go, that measure, that's the standard, 12, right? If it's 11.9 and it doesn't meet that standard. But the problem is like the standard at which you espouse is like supposed to be good or equal good. But then you have like human agents can't do the same action, but then this thing gets to do the opposite of that. I mean, you're now saying that the ruler can almost bend outside of its own standard. It can be 13 inches if it wants to, or 11, right? It seems that the standard at which you espouse is not actually an objective standard. It's like, well, in context, he can make it whatever he wants, but when it's you have to make sure it abides to the 12 inches. I think that's such a weird thing, because it strips you from the exact thing that the Christian wants, which is objective. You're now saying and you can just look at this logically. You're saying now there's moral dilemma X, right? Moral dilemma X is humans can't murder or something, or can't kill. And then God can wipe out like a bunch of Amalekites, or in Genesis 6, stick their heads underwater himself. And that's okay. But if we accept the fact that moral dilemma X has no exceptions as a premise for objectivity, I mean, you can't now just weasel out of that and special plead to some other entity is allowed to do that. You've just broken the ruler. But anyway,
question of evil and suffering. If that's your expectation, then you're going to walk away disappointed. The question to me is, which of these 4,200 worldviews offer the best intellectually and emotionally?
It's like weird to me, because it's like I have a bunch of TVs, and the TVs are like worldviews, and he's going, that TV's broken, and that TV's broken. That can't explain evil, right? That worldview's broken. But it's just going around the room saying like all these TVs don't work. Well, none of those TVs not working lends the credit that your TV works, right? Like that is an entirely separate thing that you have to analyze, which goes back to my point of like, why waste that? If you account for it, just show how you account for it. Don't play the game of, let me take on the burden of infinite amount of postulates of what. That's just who wants to play that game? And that's the game precepts play.
Satisfying answer. And that's why I'm a Christian.
Wait, pause it
Here's
again?
one piece of this, so much more.
We'll go back.
The emotionally, he said, what is the best intellectual answer, the most emotionally satisfying answer? First of all, the emotionally satisfying answer is utterly irrelevant to whether or not you have good reason to believe in something or not. So that's actually, already that kind of sets the, I don't know, it's a framework in which he's operating.
Well, no. Let me ask you. Cease. What emotionally satisfies you more, libertarian free will or determinism?
Libertarian free will, obviously.
Sure. You don't believe in libertarian free will, correct?
No. Yeah.
Right. Right. And if you did have an emotional reason, and that was your standard of your epistemic foundation to incorporate your emotions on it, you'd probably believe in that for that reason, right?
Yeah, of course.
But you realize that doesn't have any epistemic weight, correct?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, so that's the problem here.
Can be said. But how Christianity uniquely approaches this is through the person of Jesus. So in the 1800s, there was a priest by the name of Father Damien who heard about a colony of lepers who were living together on the island of Molokai.
What's up with Christianity and leprosy?
Without any pastor to care for him. So of his own volition, he went to be their pastor. He changed their wounds. He prayed for them. He fed them. He preached to them. He buried those who had passed away. And he did this for 12 years. And then one fateful day, he stood up in front of this colony of lepers and he said 2 words that changed everything. These 2 words changed it all. He stood in front of them, opened up his robe, showed the first signs of leprosy. And he said, "We lepers."
Okay. Opened up his... I had a very weird image of that.
Yeah. So,
So I don't know if anyone else did, but maybe my mind's in the gutter. But I don't want to know what that image looked like. That he opened up his robes and this is what leprosy looks like. Whoa, dude! I don't want to see that. Anyway,
he had become a leper. Now, did they know that he loved them before he got leprosy? Of course. But on that day, everything changed, didn't it? Now he understood. And second, they realized he gave everything, including his own life, because he loves them. The question is, who is Jesus more like? Father Damien before he got leprosy or after? And I think you know the answer to this. The unique, and I mean
positing Jesus in there is just begging the question. I mean, you're not giving me a reason why I should give a shit that Christianity should even be a candidate explanation for why there's evil, or how it can reconcile it. But then you're also just not answering the question that deals with the properties prescribed to the God, why it's a problem in the first place. I mean, you're just evading that.
He's just saying, hey, isn't it nice that Jesus suffered to know what it's like for us to experience suffering? Like, okay, that doesn't explain why they're suffering in the first place. Like, it's not even addressing the question. It's just talking around it completely.
Unique in the spirit of what Craig was talking about. Christian answer to the problem of suffering and pain is not that God has just sent a book as wonderful as the Bible is, or an angel or a prophet, but God has sent his own son.
Oh my God, we're gonna go John 3, like the most stock verse, and just, well, John 3:16 solves the problem. Let me just appeal to the book.
Into this creation he made, and willingly suffers and understands our hurt and our pain, takes it upon himself, lays down his life so we can have eternal life.
Okay,
So when you ask, where's God when I suffer? The answer is he's right there suffering with you. That's why Hebrews 4 says we have a high priest who sympathizes with our weaknesses. You ever been betrayed by a friend? You can't say, God, you don't understand. He's like, yeah, actually, one of my top...
I feel betrayed by the answers that you didn't give me.
12 betrayed me.
It's just so, what a non-answer. Like, the fact that even if this was true, right, that there is this God and he sent himself to die, to somehow, first of all, if he's this perfect being with all knowledge, why would that even be necessary? Wouldn't he already know what suffering was, just in principle? So that I don't understand why he would need to go through all that. Two, if he's all powerful, why would any of the need to suffer in this way be necessary in the first place? Like, he doesn't resolve the problem. Like, it's not like, somebody gets raped and has their life destroyed, and I'm supposed to be like to accept that and say, oh, it's okay that it happened because, hey, Jesus is there suffering in the back there. How does that make it okay? How does that absolve or resolve the problem? It's still, it makes no sense in the context of a God who's supposed to be all powerful and all loving, that the solution to this problem of being, oh, well, it's okay because I'm also suffering. That doesn't make any sense.
If you're in physical pain, you're like, God, you don't understand. Jesus is like, yeah, I was crucified. Pretty sure I understand.
And the people that go through, like, people act as if Jesus' crucifixion is like the worst, like it's like a Jordan Peterson, proclaims like it's the most tragic thing. No, it's not. It's not the most tragic thing ever. Like, you can make that story more tragic by just adding the fact that it was unwilling. That would just in that self make it more tragic. But
again, what does his suffering resolve? What's the fact he suffered to resolve? It's completely an irrelevant point. It doesn't make any of it okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never. That's the one thing. As somebody who's like as distant from Christianity as you could possibly be, growing up and otherwise, I've never even understood. Like, that story is always like, what, just on its face, like, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's like, I have to send myself, who's also me, to save everybody, and I have to die for it. But the sacrifice results in me being the king of everybody forever. Like, if I'm offered tomorrow by an angel, Mike, all you have to do is, we're going to do the exact same things that Jesus did to you, and you're going to be the king of everybody forever, I'd probably take that gig. I might go, you know what? That sounds pretty cool. I'll fix a bunch of problems while I have all that power. Like, I'll actually do some work. There's nothing profound about that for me.
That's what Hebrews.
Nor does it solve the problem of suffering, especially after you did the act and it still continues. Like, what was the point of it anyway?
Means. So God is there suffering with us and promises to comfort us through his Holy Spirit and the church as we suffer, and to redeem that for eternal life. I think we can only make sense of suffering in light of eternity.
Yeah.
In light of eternity, which is why Mother Teresa said.
Which relates back to the way that you feel about wanting to be with God or wanting to be without God, which will just go back to the fact that you care about your well-being more than you do.
Eternity again is irrelevant. I mean, it's not like because I'm gonna live forever, it's okay that I was brutally abused at some point. And it's all okay because I'm gonna live eternally. What if I don't want to live eternally? Like, it's these are.
What if suffering is? What if the suffering is part of that? Like, the fact that you would experience eternity, it doesn't solve that if that's suffering for some agent within itself. Which for me it would be. I hate the idea of eternity.
Yeah.
All right, I don't know what video this is, so we will find out.
On March 16th, 2021.
I think it's the same video.
The
Yep, it's the same video.
Oops.
That's my bad. If you hear it twice, it becomes true. Oh, he's got one here. Why does God allow evil? So maybe we'll get some more.
Why does God allow evil? All of us, at some point in our lives, have asked this question and wrestled with it. If God is all powerful, he can stop evil. If God is all good, wouldn't he want to stop evil? And yet evil exists. So some skeptics would say maybe an all-powerful good God does not. It's a question that Christians certainly wrestle with. We see in the Bible, people like David, people like Job, like Joseph, asking for justice. But we also see a lot of non-believers, like Einstein, who's clearly one of the great thinkers in the history of the world, who believed that somehow the science and math of the universe pointed towards a God, but he couldn't believe in the Christian God because of the existence of pain and suffering. People like Darwin, who gave us Darwinian evolution. Really, at its core, his problem was suffering and evil within the world. Where do we begin to tackle?
I'd be interested on seeing that, because a lot of people that, like myself, who agree the problem of evil is a problem, I don't think it's like the biggest problem to deal with. I think there's way more problems that.
Yeah.
An issue as big as this. So what is evil? Sometimes when we think about evil, we think there's good and evil, these equal and opposite forces that kind of are competing against each other. That's not what evil is. See, you can have good without evil, but you can't have evil without good. You can't have evil without good. Think about like truth and a lie. You can have truth without somebody telling a lie, but you can't tell a lie unless there's first such a thing as truth to be corrupted. That's what evil is like. Evil is a corruption of something that is first good. So if evil is a corruption of good, then good must exist. And if good exists, then interestingly, there.
Do you want to give us some points about the evil good thing? My laptop fan is doing something weird, so I'm gonna hop out and join back in. But
Sure.
if you want to go ahead and on that, take me 2 seconds.
Yeah. Well, again, this is a non-answer, because even if we were to acknowledge that you first had to have good and then to have its corruption, one, it doesn't explain why there would have to be a corruption, why you couldn't just retain the good, period, why it would need to go to that end of the spectrum. And two, why if there was a corruption, why that corruption couldn't be resolved and then evil not continue on. It doesn't explain how a perfect being could create an imperfect creation. So these are, I just feel like he's sidestepping the issue by playing a language game that is not relevant.
John goes, the faux hawk is so distracting. So I guess my initial thing is I'm not sure how merely stating like that you can't have good without evil or evil without good, and that's some like, so what that apologetic is to me is like saying that it was necessary for the Holocaust to occur. It's essentially that what I hear when someone goes, you can't have good without the evil, and that suffer. The point that they try to get to is that suffering can lead to some benefit, which I'm sure he'll get into.
Which I can agree in a context, but there's clearly sufferings that don't lead to higher states of well-being.
Sure.
And they themselves, with this idea of heaven, think that it's possible to have good without evil. And apparently, before the whole original sin took place, it was, as far as my understanding, that it was supposed to be heaven on earth, right? Like, so there was good before there was an evil involved. So it's possible for one to exist without the other.
Well, so my thing though is it seems like you're just stating that we have this phenomena P that we call P, because good will be defined as so many different things, right? But it's P, and then we have not P. Well, yes, you have not P in light of having the proposition of P. If something is good, there's something that is not good, right? So you're just going to have necessarily an entailment that there is something that is not the case on that. The problem I find is that saying there has to be good without evil. Someone can define their normative value of what good or bad is, from my perspective, opposite of that. Whether they're right or not, if we figure out the objective good or bad, we can set that aside. It seems that we just operate off of, someone can operate off of that value being switched. And of course it follows, I won't have the opposite of this, or not P, if I don't have P. That's just stating a logical entailment of a claim that there is also the not P part to it.
I want to address a comment real quick that was posted by Cafe. If everything was good, then you wouldn't know what evil is because you have nothing to contrast good with. Let me just point out that there could be different types of sufferings. There could be sufferings that can lead to higher well-being, but then sufferings which are only impediments, and you maybe survive in spite of those types of sufferings. So, if I want to, this is a kind of a stupid example, but off the top of my head, if I want to be in better shape and in better health, then I should work out. Now, it's going to take some suffering, some difficulty to work out to get to the goal that I want to be at. It's going to take some hardship, right? But that alone would show me, hey, here's a difference between me feeling good and some of the hardship that I have to go through to get to that goal. Where's the necessity for people starving in the world and dying horrible deaths? What have they learned through the suffering that eventually took their life? And why should it be that we should just say it's okay that they've experienced it because now they're in heaven and can experience eternity with God? Something that we didn't agree to as even an option, that it would just trust upon us as a, supposed reality that we just must accept.
Well, the answer to that is the soul building theodicy, but which is just a bunch of post hoc crap to me. But yeah, we'll finish this up.
There must be a God. So when somebody raised the problem of evil, what
the acoustic guitar, Sean, you didn't have to add it, man. Like, I get you're trying to pull on the heartstrings of people, but you didn't have to do it.
they're assuming is there's a real standard of goodness that exists, objective good. And if that is the case, then there must be a God to ground that good. So raising the problem of evil is kind of an indirect piece of evidence that there first must be a good moral standard, namely a God, a moral lawgiver, to ground that good. So this helps.
A moral lawgiver is just a way to state that it's to confuse obedience with something that is a moral ought, or like a thing that you should actually do. There's nothing that gives me a reason on why. Like I think a really good example that you've told me that I really enjoy is like I think I added part of it, or you added this part at the beginning. I don't remember, but you definitely made me think on this one. And that's like, a teacher could tell you that it's some agreed upon rule, right? Like you can't go to the bathroom at some given time during the classroom. It's like, that's some agreed upon rule that has utility for the environment that you're in. And then you have like the same teacher says, okay, turn around and hit the student behind you with a book, right? It's like, there's nothing about the fact that the obedience or that you should listen to the authority or the obedience that elucidates on why the action was good, right? Like that's to conflate abiding by a rule as opposed to understanding why that is the normative evaluation at which you should follow. I don't know what your take is on that, since we differ there a little bit.
There's literally it doesn't follow whatsoever that if we can observe good and evil and make the distinction, that suggests that there has to be a creator which sets up a standard. No, we can, just by the fact that we have consciousness and can have different types of experiences, then can describe and communicate those experiences. That is how we compartmentalize the world and our phenomenology within it. So there's nothing there that requires the assumption of a creator being that has to set anything up whatsoever.
Yep. And I think CJ hits my point in a better way. It's like, he says, it's going to be the case with any norm that you can be out of accord with that norm. And that's exactly it. You have some norm or some standard, let's say that's X or P. When you're out of accord with that, I mean, you're just stating like it's not that norm, right? That would be bad. That would be deemed as not okay. But to highlight the dichotomy between like what would be a true contradiction if they were both to say that they're the same is just trivial. I mean, it doesn't address the problem. It just points out, hey, when you have this thing, you can also have the things that aren't that norm or things that go out of it. And so I think that's a really weird answer from my perspective. Even if I accept one must follow the other, it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve normative issues on what good even means or what evil means, because we can find an example of someone who has that switched from someone else's view. And then also what I was saying earlier is that I don't know if he's going to go into it, but a lot of the apologetics is that you need this suffering, and I know you went into this a little bit, but you need this suffering to it has like utility in making you better or for whatever reason.
Which again is true for a very small percentage of suffering.
But my sticking point is more so that would you want to live in a world where we had to go through the civil rights in order to have rights for Black people, or would you rather have us just been equal from the beginning? Would you rather have not had to have legislation and lobbying for gay marriage and have to go through all that shit to have the better outcome of just having them be equal? No, it should just be given in that sense. Like, that's just something that's, to me seems so weird. You can now hide behind, well, we had, suffering creates this great thing. It's, to me, that's like saying you should thank the guy that throws the grenade, right? So that a hero can jump on top of it and save a family. It's a very weird notion to me to say like suffering can bring about good in this way. It seems that you're just committed to like, okay, well, let's thank the guy that made the situation or something because there's some good from it. That's what you're saying in reference to God. I mean, you're saying we should thank the guy that throws the grenade. I think that's absurd. I think that takes away from the person who had no choice but to jump on it in light of things that were out of their control. In this case, God not being the person who this is out of his control or its control. And if it is out of their control, then we just pointed out something that God's not sovereign over. And so we have a different issue.
Helps us frame the question, but it doesn't tell us why God allows evil. Why doesn't he stop it? Well, one way to make sense of this is the purpose for which human beings exist. Why are we here? God has not made us like trees. He's not made us like mountains. He hasn't made us like animals. God has uniquely given human beings the ability to make meaningful choices. And that's because God wants to be in a relationship with us. He wants to allow us to have meaningful relationships with other people. And if you create beings capable of loving, then guess what? You also have to have beings capable.
That's just a post hoc assessment of the fact that we have the capability to express feelings. You're just capitalizing on that and using it for your advantage. There's no novel aspect of saying, of looking at phenomenological states of happiness or being able to showcase love or express love that lends any credit to God unless you do it from a top-down approach. It doesn't work from a bottom-up. You don't get to that answer. You could get to so many answers that way. I could just say that the spirits made crystals in a way to express healing to each other. It just doesn't have any value to me to espouse that.
And also, it doesn't follow that to create good people means that you'll be creating evil people. Because again, we are told that wasn't how reality used to be until original sin, and that we're told that it's not what reality will be once everybody is, beamed up into heaven. Also, again, it's this type of thing where anybody can make claims, like provide actual evidence as to why I should take any of what you think seriously. How do you know that this is what God wants? How do you know that this is his plan? How do you know these are the characteristics of God? Seeing it.
I have an answer for you.
The Bible.
It's in the Bible.
Right. Which is just evading, obviously, the problem, and it's entirely circular. So, anyway, let's keep going.
Choosing not to love. Now, if I found out, for example, that my wife was a robot and she was programmed to say the right thing, do the right things to make me think that she really was the most faithful, loving wife, it would completely change our relationship. The only reason there's value with my wife is that we choose to love each other. That's what God chose with us. He gave us the ability to choose to follow him and to do good and to do wonderful things and have courage and fight for peace and show justice. And if God's going to give us...
Okay, let's use that fight for peace part. Because does that include fighting against people that are gay that want to have equal rights like you do? Because I don't... When I look outside and I see, like, when I have Sean here standing outside of a school about to pick up his kid, and he decides it's a good time to post a video about evil because you can tell it's a problem in his life and he can't actually reconcile it. It's weird to me that, like, you want to use all these types of things in your advantage. Like, let's real fast. Let's go back.
To follow him and to do good and to do wonderful value with my wife is that we choose to love each other. That's what God chose with us. He gave us the ability to choose to follow him and to do good and to do wonderful things and have courage and fight for peace.
And fight for peace. But when you look out the fucking window out of anybody that is actually acting in any way towards Christianity in a large group outside, it is spreading nothing but hate towards people. That's all it is. It's it. You can disguise it as love all you want, but it's not that. And this is what I hate about Christianity. Let's put this fucking stupid
and to do good. And
let's put this uplifting music behind it, and it drives me nuts that you can disguise something so evil in such a way. I'm going to get off my soapbox and stop cutting a wrestling promo, but it's just, it drives me nuts that you can hide things like this. And I have to go out and look with my own eyes, people who espouse the same thing as you doing the opposite of what any rational person would consider in the realm of a value of good or love. And I'm an anti-realist, and that's a problem that I can even point out that right there is not the value that anyone should have.
I also want to add that this idea that, we see this in the world because God gives us free will. God doesn't give a shit about free will many times in the Old Testament, where he actually does step in and isn't just observing to let us be, and is killing people left and right because they disobeyed him. Where is the concern about free will there? Where is the concern over the free will of the victim taking in the suffering that they did not agree to? These are all evasions from start to finish.
to do wonderful things and have courage and fight for peace and show justice. But if God's going to give us the ability, by definition, without free will, he has to give us the ability to choose wrong things and bring suffering into the world. So yes, God knew that we would do horrible things without free will. But God also knew that it's only by giving us that free will that we could truly...
And you skip over the part where it's dangled on a tree and then subsequently a punishment for everyone that had no idea or could have never had a possibility of even knowing. I always use the example. It's like if I create AI, right, and I arm it with a flamethrower called the Free Will 9000, right, and then I just it goes and burns my fucking house down, and I go, okay, well, I explicitly said don't use the Free Will flamethrower 9000 on my house, and you did it anyway. Well, now I'm going to have to punish every AI that comes after this that had nothing to do with the situation, but it's okay. I'll make it better because I'll send myself as a robot and I'll die. I'll be deconstructed or I'll self-destruct for all the sake of the rest of the AI. Nothing about that makes any sense. There's no sense in that. It just does not add up.
Truly love God, truly love other people, and experience the good, best thing.
But when I send myself as a fucking robot and I self-destruct for everybody, I want to show you that I loved you. That's what I want.
But again, this is also ignoring the fact that it is implicit in the Christian belief that it is possible to live in an existence where evil doesn't exist. So again, talking about what eventually they think heaven will be. It's not like by definition there's not going to be evil in heaven. So doesn't make any sense to then say, oh, well, we'll just wait on that, and everybody can suffer now, but you won't need suffering then. Yeah,
you won't need suffering for the people that you love that are burning in hell, and you won't experience that. Why? I don't know, because I guess the only option is God has to delude you once you get to heaven for that not to be a reality, because that would be the only way at which you wouldn't. I mean, if you're going to try to say that because that person achieved that state, they're going to go, oh, you had all the opportunities. No, you don't. You don't have the opportunities. There's people that have never heard of the God at which people claim exists. And I mean, people try to reconcile that in every way possible. But I'll go on I feel like I'm going on a tangent that's a little past the point, but it's a very strange notion for me. That what you can do with what's actually the case in the book or what is actually being said there, you can jump over that and be like, well, it's just that God wants us to have a good relationship with them. It's like, don't worry about the fact that he dangled, our salvation on a tree, and the fact that you have to accept this guy that died on a cross that you're 2,000 years removed from and have to listen to the testimonies of Paul and people you've never met, and ignore the fact that if your fucking wife told you she saw the risen Tupac, that you wouldn't believe her, but just believe this. And you can hide all those problems and expect rational people who care about truth to believe that or buy into that. I mean, you might as well sell snake oil at that point. I mean, you might as well be a fucking mysticist, spiritualist selling homeopathic remedies. I just, sorry.
Things that life has.
All right, well, I guess that's it for that one. Cease, you have one in there. Did you want anything specific, or just click one of the links that you gave me?
Yeah, just click one of them. I don't know. I don't remember which one I sent you. I know I just found some titles that I thought, hey, this might be something interesting.
This ad? There's no way this ad is an hour and 5 minute long for 12 Stone Church. There's no way that is the case. By the way, I'm on my personal YouTube channel, and so everybody in the audience or the viewers should love me for the fact that I'm now going to have suggested Sean McDowell videos in my feed for a while, so I do this for you.
How do we know that God exists? Well, buckle your seatbelts, because I'm going to give you 5 quick arguments for the existence of God. Number 1 is the universe had a beginning. We know this now from science. We know this from philosophy, that the universe began to exist. It's not eternal. Therefore, there must be a cause.
Okay. Anyone that tells you that the universe began to exist is either misinformed at what the actual science is saying, or they're lying to you.
Look, people can go back to the videos we've had with physicists talking about this. There's no consensus at all that this says the universe had to have a beginning. And even if it did, that beginning would not suggest that God had to be the cause. Nor does it suggest that it makes any kind of linguistic sense to say that a cause can exist outside of the universe. Again, it depends on how you define a universe.
Well, sure. What are our causes for things that you would say began? They're of ex materia, right? Of things like I said earlier, a baby is only going to begin to exist through non-baby things, right? Through an egg meeting a sperm, or a table is only going to exist, begin to exist, if you want to use that terminology, through a carpenter affecting something, and that affecting something is nails, lacquer, wood, things like that, to have the table. When you talk about Christian doctrine seems to commit you to creation ex nihilo. I don't understand how. Think about this for a second. You have 2 options. I feel like you have God created, or God affected. Let's say God's making something begin to exist, and let's say that the something that begins to exist is X. How is it the case that you cause something to exist? If something has to be affected, right? There has to be an affect for the effect. If it's nothing, you're just saying God affected nothing, which is just an incoherent statement. You're saying God affected nothing to create something. But then if you're saying ex materia, you're just saying God used some other substances to create the universe. And then in what context of time or space does that even make any sense from any perspective if you're using material that are only definitionally confined to what we know in space-time? That part doesn't make sense to me. There's an argument by Scott Clifton that he uses called the Kalam cosmological argument for the non-existence of God.
That's hilarious.
And I think it's one of the greatest things in terms of showing this problem, that what you're espousing with creating from nothing at that point is that you have a causal relation between an existent entity and a non-existent thing, right? Nothingness or whatever it is. We only know of causation in relation to things, right? If I make my fist begin to exist, I didn't bring my fist into existence. It's just we're talking about a causal relation between my fingers and my palm, and when I close them, when I open them. It's not, let's say I bring a fist into existence and now I bring it out of existence. Everything that we talk about is formations of things that we draw kind of arbitrary lines. I mean, I think they're really good examples. If you were to do a bird's eye view of a football field with a bunch of marching band, like a giant marching band, they're spelling out letters and they're spelling out shapes. Like you wouldn't say like when they create a shape that it's of some new entity. Let's say it's trillions of them. Like at what point does that begin to become some new thing? Because from my perspective, from the first law of thermodynamics, it seems that we're talking about trillions of occurrences that are changing form, not really beginning to exist in any way.
Okay, real quick, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I just want to comment on this.
Yeah, we can do whatever we want.
All that is empirically accessible to subjects' consistent sensations on your worldview. Sensations are identical to states of a subject's nervous system. And then he says, thereby making a subject's nervous system empirically inaccessible to himself. So
I think he's straw manning because he did this the last time that they were trying to paint you into an identity theorist position. I don't know. I need to know what he means by are identical to the subject's nervous system, because if you're incorporating like brain states or neural states and saying that's identical, I don't think that's something you would accept.
No. And what I would say is that yes, my experience.
He says we're leaving something out. There's an asymmetrical relation between substantive and one of its adjectives, which prevents an adjective from having itself as its own substantive.
Well, let me just put it this way. There's a difference between saying that I have a sort of a perception of something, and that my perception is the same as the thing I'm perceiving.
Oh, I'm sorry. This was the first part. I'm sorry.
Again, I don't think that's what's being said. Well, let's go back to let's address this at another time. It just seems to me like there is a confusion here between what is meant by empirically accessible as far as a perception and what it is that perception is fully capturing. Like the brain state is like looking at, the side of a cube. It's not the full phenomena. Yes, I don't have everything my nervous system is doing is inaccessible to me as far as visually I'm not perceiving it. But
it looks like you cut out. Let me know in the comments if it's Cease or myself. I think it's Cease. If it's Cease, we'll just go with the video. Or I'll finish up on what I was saying. Well, actually, I'll hear what Sean has to say. But the point I'm trying to make is that if he's going to go into anything about ex nihilo or creation out of nothing, I want to highlight that we only talk about modes of causality from existent things to other existent things. Like I give the example of the fist. It seems like an odd statement to rely on some fringe view of causality.
Cause outside of the universe that's personal and powerful and intelligent, spaceless and timeless.
Okay. So you could just remove intelligent, and I already have a more parsimonious. If I just say that there is a spaceless, timeless, powerful, and I remove personal and I remove intelligent, then I have a more parsimonious answer, and I had the same grounds as you. I just made shit up. So, yeah, like I could just posit that there is some thing that gives way or some acausal thing there that gives way, or whatever you want to say there. I just don't understand why adding the attributes matter when you could take the same thing and just go, okay, well, I don't have to add all the extra ones. There's nothing about intelligence that I think is substantiated there. The fact that first off, you have to give a reason for me to accept intent. Merely postulating or just asserting it and saying, oh, okay, well, there has to be intent. There doesn't. There's no cosmological model that goes, there has to be intent. It doesn't need it. You know, if you can substantiate that in any way, I mean, feel free, you'll win yourself a Nobel Prize.
A lot like God. The beginning of the universe points towards a beginner.
Assuming there's a beginning, it doesn't mean that there is a agent of a beginner or a being of a beginner. I mean, well, if you use philosophical being, like a necessary being, and you don't reference that to a specific thinking thing or of intelligence, sure.
Second, what we call the fine-tuning of the universe. There are certain universal laws of physics and cosmology that exist on a razor's edge.
Let's go back to the beginning part. Let's try to be a little thorough on it. Yeah, so the jury is not in or out on whether the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe, which is what I should have said at the beginning of that clip. I don't know how I phrased it the first time, but it's not in or out whether the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe. Someone's trying to sell that to you. They're doing exactly that. They're just trying to sell it to you. There is no epistemic justification for that assertion. And it's not just a lack of empirical data. I mean, like, think about it just philosophically. Like, if something began to exist, like, how are you going to demonstrate it could have caused to do so by something that already exists? Like, how does anything that exists cause something that doesn't exist to do anything, let alone begin existing? And this goes back to when I talk about modes of causality are only going to work between things that exist in some status already. I mean, the fact that I can make a direction or a link between closing my fist and not is because there is a relation between my fingers, my palm, and my muscles, and how I contract, or with the marching band example of how you form things. But do you say at some point it becomes some new ontological entity? I mean, that, for me, for the first premise, that gets into a different territory. But let's just say that, like, God is going to cause X to begin existing, right? Like, if he's doing the causing, what is being affected by the cause, right? It doesn't seem like there has to be something, like, it either has to be X, the thing at which begins existing, which wouldn't make any sense because it exists prior to its state of existence, so you can rule that out, or it's nothing at all. But if you're taking the idea that it's nothing at all, then you're just making a statement that God's affected nothing. It seems to be a logically incoherent statement. But yeah, I'll get off my soapbox for that.
Towards a beginner. Second, what we call the fine-tuning of the universe. There are certain universal laws of physics and cosmology that exist on a razor's edge. And they all have one strange thing in common. If these laws of, say, like gravity were the slightest bit different, our universe could not exist.
Okay, so that is a very common thing. Like, I've heard people use it's like if you say, if it's off by, right? Let's say like, I always use the mass of a neutrino, which was an example Arvin Ash used that I think is a really good example. It's odd to me to say, first off, when you say if it's off by, if the mass of a neutrino was off by, like, whatever amount, you know, we couldn't have the expansion of the universe, or it would just collapse within on itself, depending on whether, you know, it's heavier or lighter. Well, that begs the question, like, what measurements are you using? Well, when we measure the mass of a neutrino, it's in kilograms. I believe it's 10 to the negative 37 kilograms or something like that. And I'm not a physicist or astrophysicist or cosmologist or anything, but it seems weird to me that you could say if it's off by this much, life couldn't begin. Because to me, that seems like, and this is the example Arvin used, it seems like what you're saying is, like, LeBron James is 10 to the 4 light years in height. If he was 10 to the 5 light years in height, he couldn't play basketball. If he was 10 to the 3 light years in height, he couldn't play basketball. Well, sure, because in one case he's going to be a 60-foot lumbering giant, and in the other case he's going to be 6 inches tall, so he would have no success. But if the limit which you use, kilograms or light years, is more precise, and let's say we measure LeBron James in inches and say, okay, well, if LeBron James is I don't really know inches well. Let's say 51 inches. Hopefully I didn't create a giant of a man or small man. If you say he's 5% off of that height, and say he's, I don't know, let's say it's a few inches shorter, a few inches taller, you wouldn't say, well, he couldn't play in the NBA. He'd probably still play in the NBA, and he'd probably still be one of the best. And I think similarly, when you say like the mass of a neutrino couldn't be 10 to the 38 negative 38 kilograms, or it couldn't be 10 to the negative 36 kilograms, all you're telling me is that based on the measurement you're using currently. But it could just be the case that you're using something that fluctuates, which it does in such a vast amount that that's not really indicative of whether or not a fluctuation could actually occur. And I think, so I think you or someone else brought that to me, and I brought that up to Cease's brother. And I got to get him on it because I don't remember his answer, but he gave me like a really long, I believe he gave me an email of it, or maybe I'm confusing him with someone else, and said that objection isn't really applicable to the actual measurements because you are actually using. Oh, there he is. Maybe he can elucidate on it because he's here now. I don't remember if it was him or someone else, but someone sent me a document with credentials in that said that objection isn't doesn't actually like address the point that Arvin is making. I don't know because I don't get into physics and stuff as much. I love it, but it's been like my passion in the last year. But yeah, I will leave that to the experts.
Yet they're all set right where they need to be to allow the existence and sustenance of complex life. The fine-tuning of the universe points towards a fine-tuner. Third, DNA. Do you know how much information is inside the DNA in your body? I saw one study that said
that's entirely irrelevant. It does not matter. You're going to have to show that there's no way that we could have what you claim without a God. I mean, that's your burden. In all of our models, we don't need the extra ontological entity of a God. It's not needed. It's not necessary.
The amount of information in one cell in your body is equivalent of about 500,000 movies. That's 500,000 movies. Can you imagine? Now the question is, where does that end?
If a God existed, there would be you don't even have to have the cells. I don't understand that point. Like, why do you have to have the things intricately work the way they do? He could make it a way where those aren't required. They don't need certain antecedent causes. Like, that's what you would expect under a model of naturalism. That's not something you're going to expect in a I can do whatever the fuck I want model.
Information come from? Can't be explained by evolution, can't be explained by chemicals or time. Whenever we see information, a sign that says stop, we say a person put it there. So just as the information in a book points towards an author, the information in DNA points towards a mind or an author of life. Fourth, the moral argument basically has two premises. Number one, if there's objective moral values.
This is the worst fucking argument a Christian could ever use for so many reasons. Okay? I'm gonna let
God must exist. There are objective moral values, therefore God exists.
Okay. So modus ponens, if P being objective morals and values, and God must exist being Q, if we accept P, Q, P, therefore Q, boom. Okay. First off, it's demonstrably bullshit that these are entailed. To me, this is like saying if it's Tuesday, the moon is made of cream cheese. It's Tuesday, therefore the moon is made of cream cheese. Oh, sorry, Cease. Let me bring you back in. Or maybe not. Do you want me to remove you?
No, I'm good. No, I was
now?
going to say, I'm sorry about that. My internet crashed. I had to reset my router and everything. I don't know what's been going on lately, but I've been having a lot of internet problems.
You're good. I'm going to mute your mic because you have some background noise.
Oh, right. 1 second.
No worries. So anyway, this is a terrible argument in that, first off, objective morals and values you can be an atheist and be a moral naturalist, moral realist. Now, I know that doesn't prove that morals are objective. I don't believe they are. But what I'm going to say is that to say that objective morals and values can only exist in virtue of a God is just false. And it's also false for a different reason. Not the fact that we have better arguments about normativity without the God. It's that it's necessarily subjective. In the worldview, when you talk about these objective moral values, you're talking about there being like, say if we had premise one, objective moral values have no exceptions, right? They're either objectively true or they're not. There's no exceptions, okay? Premise two, according to Christianity, murder is wrong. Okay, premise three, God can do murder, and it's not wrong. Humans cannot. Conclusion, Christianity does not have objective morals. You cannot have an exception to a moral dilemma. If you think you can, you've just redefined objectivity to suit your needs. The fact that God can stick children's head underwater in Genesis or send bears to maul 42 children, which, by the way, is not relegated to them being young men. That is a bullshit apologetic. Even in the Hebrew sense, if you actually look at what is being spoken there, it's very explicit. It's not young men. They were telling him to go away. They weren't threatening. And Elijah decided to cast a curse to have multiple people killed. If anyone had done that, that would be immoral. Now you have an exception. You have multiple examples of these exceptions. You cannot have that entailment from this God. And in fact, in philosophy, I'll pull up a chart. It's labeled under subjectivism. This is like, there's no debate about this in philosophy. The only people that debate this are theologians or Christians in philosophy that think that they still have a leg on objective moral. Sorry, so you can come back in and see that. It's the most obscene thing. I hate this argument. It's a valid structure, modus ponens, but it's not sound in any way. The entailment just doesn't follow.
And again, it's completely delusional. It's ignoring, millennia of moral philosophy that grounds morality completely outside of any kind of need for an authority.
This is hilarious. If DNA has folded proteins, then we can assume that proteins are just like my laundry that also needed to be folded. I don't know why I love that so much. I hope you're not a Christian, Ian, and that was a joke. I assume it is, but you never know in this day and age. Yeah, this is the shittiest argument that any Christian could ever use. Like I think that moral realism points. Let me answer Mark's thing. I think that moral realism points to theism, but I don't think the arguments for moral realism are good. So I think you're rational in accepting error theory. I lean towards that in a way, but I'm still in my kind of navigation of that. Though one thing I can definitely express is that the idea of objective moral values from the Christian God is asinine. It defeats itself using its own book. So I don't take that seriously. I don't take any theists seriously. If they actually use that argument to me, I don't think that they have actually looked into these things very well.
Now, how can we say?
And this is coming from this guy who's respected and renowned by Christians. That's a problem.
There's objective moral values. Well, number one, it's kind of obvious. We all know that torturing an innocent child for fun is wrong.
But God can do it when he wants to just restart the world. What the fuck, Sean? What logic is that? That we don't just kill things. Yes, I agree. We don't. Why does your God get the exception and then you get to call it objective?
And call it moral. It's just pure delusion.
All know that it's obvious. Second, in The Abolition of Man, C.S. Lewis said across cultures universally, there's common principles that everybody knows and lives as if they're true. Principles of honesty, principles of...
No, I don't. That's bullshit. Most people lie. Most people tell exaggerations. Most people do this without a second bat of an eye to it. And in fact, a lot of people only care when they get caught.
Now, there are certain, like, for example, if everybody thought that it was okay to just kill, we wouldn't have survived it this far. But again, there's no reason to explain that away as a supernatural cause. Like, things can be completely explained through naturalism. Nowhere do we need to make the assumptions that he's making to explain those things away. And those commonalities started. First you only cared about your tribe, and then it extended as time went by, and as we, I think, grew in moral progress. But now, at least ideally, we have an understanding as to, again, depending on, there are definitely a lot of groups and cultures that don't understand these moral, what I would call truths. So.
I got two things I want to address before we play the video. One, that's a little strong, J. Mike, though I don't agree with Craig's argument, but he's definitely looked into things. Yeah, Craig's looked into things, but I'm got to be honest. I don't have a lot of respect for William Lane Craig. I have a lot of respect for like Rasmussen. I had a lot of respect for Ben Arbor before he passed away. I still do, but in terms of watching his videos while he was doing them or debates with Hoppy. Craig is like so low tier to me. Like for example, when you talk about things beginning to exist, for example, and if you posit the claim to him, like, well, things don't really begin to exist, they change form. I mean, when are you going to draw the arbitrary limit between a building versus certain chemicals versus a person? Like, you're going to have to define when it begins to exist and what the cause was, and you get to a really messy area there. It works on the way that we use language, but when you posit this to him, he just goes, well, the person that brings that is just a mereological nihilist who thinks that there's no composite objects. And then you're going, that doesn't matter. That you, like, he just says it's absurd. Go listen to anything I did an AMA earlier, and when I was asked about the pet peeves thing, I think I don't know if it was that or not, I said it really bothers me when Craig does that, or when someone says that's just absurd. I don't give a shit if you think it's absurd. By the way, because you think it's absurd, this position that I hold. Well, absurdity wins when you hold a position like something ex nihilo, which makes literally logically no sense at all. I'm sorry, but absurdity wins, even if you think it is the case. And also absurdity to the fact that even if you were a mereological nihilist or whatever, I don't know if he was in that interview if he was using the right term or not. But let's say he wasn't.
That's the other thing. He used that incorrectly. Let's say that he is. Let's just say that he is. If that's that case, the fact that I'm a mereological nihilist and you think it's absurd, that's like me saying, well, you're just a Christian. That's absurd. That doesn't mean I win. That's not an argument. That's an expression of an emotion. Just to address...
He says, read Craig. I've read Craig since I was like 15 years old. I'm 30. I've read a lot of Craig. It's like...
Yeah, I don't find him particularly convincing on any level. And also, like I said, he actually uses the wrong terminology in his rebuttal of the perspective you just posed. He calls it something that it's actually entirely not. I find him completely unimpressive, to be honest. I don't understand why a lot of even atheists fear his approach to debating and stuff like that, because I've never found him to be convincing or skilled in any of this. If you
want a prime example, and I'll try to put it in the description of this video. If you want a prime example of somebody that is not an honest interlocutor, first off, he's petty. I don't want to talk with internet atheists or people that don't have credentials. Well, you don't have any credentials in cosmology and asserting that there's a beginning of the universe, but yet you have no fucking problem doing that. You have no problem stepping in the realm at which you don't have any expertise in, and you have no. And maybe he does, and I don't know it. If he does, I'd love to hear it.
Sean Carroll annihilated him, and I don't even like Sean Carroll. I think he's wrong about a lot of things, but on
theoretical
basic knowledge,
bullshit annihilated him, and he was a guy who just put a video on his face.
That by the way, that account, theoretical bullshit, is a phenomenal account. I mean, I know he doesn't post. He posts like a video every year or something, but his content is phenomenal.
He's an Emmy Award-winning philosopher. So, I mean, not for being a philosopher, but
for being
being in a soap opera. But yeah, but still. Anyway, yeah. The example I was going to use, I'll put it in the description. There's the Kalam argument for God's non-existence, which I think is a pretty good argument. And Craig doesn't even do a good job at understanding the first premise, and he completely strawmans it into equivocating nothing, like nothingness, to like no thing. And it's so painfully bad, and his arguments are just like, it's absurd, it's bad, it's crazy, it's weird. I don't care. Like Malpass says that's weird a lot. Like I've heard Malpass go, yeah, but that's a little weird to me. But he actually will go on and elucidate on why that is weird or why that is absurd.
His approach to the moral conversation is, we actually have one of our early videos was on that question. He completely fails to understand moral philosophy. And I mean, Harris, I know a lot of people don't like Harris, but I feel like as though Harris completely annihilated Craig in a debate to show his hypocrisy in his approach. So yeah, he's just not, he's just not somebody that I think actually, because what's his name? Mark Sloan, is saying that Craig answers your objections. But I've seen, I've read some of these answers, both in the context of what he says about cosmology, in the context of what he says about morality. Again, maybe we'll do more breakdowns of him in particular, but I just find his answers to be completely inadequate.
Well, I find his approach to be extremely petty and just, I'm not going to talk with these people because I'm better than them. It's like, dude, shut up. Like there's people online creating YouTube videos with a camera put on their face, and they are just destroying points that you make, like just absolutely obliterating it. I mean, this is a guy that doesn't think the first law of thermodynamics undercuts what it means for something to begin to exist when things are just changing forms in the world. We'll get into that on a different video.
I just gonna say what he said. He's not talking about. Then I think I'm just misunderstanding you. I'm sorry. I think I misread what you were referring to there.
Okay, let me address this. I caught J Mike's counter with DD. I hope you take the discussion sincerely. No, Keifi, you didn't actually like look at the conversation. I presented syllogisms to him. So when you want to say that I just ended up trolling him, when
that was only after he repeatedly insulted you.
Let me explain. Because Keifi is clearly doesn't even understand what the fuck he's talking about. And it doesn't surprise me coming from a guy who thinks that like DMT is like the fucking root of finding out knowledge. But let me say, it bothers me that like I go in there, right? I have a conversation with Darth. I package his argument in a syllogism for him, which he agrees to, and then I show him why that doesn't make sense if I don't have a belief state, right? I don't have knowledge of that God. He goes, well, how do you not have knowledge of the God? And I say, okay, I'll defend premise 2. I don't have a belief in the proposition. If I don't have a belief in the proposition, then that removes one of the criteria from justified true belief. I don't have belief. I can't have knowledge. Boom. Premise 2, gone. It is the case that I don't have knowledge of it. Darth realized that defeats his argument, realizes that there's a logical entailment there, and he doesn't want to talk to me, right? So I go into politics and religion. I message him and say, hey, why don't you want to talk? He says, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. Canadian Catholic messages me and go, hey, I got Darth in here if you want to talk to him. So I go in there, and he says he will leave the room if I'm in there. So I had to pretend to be someone else just to get him to fucking talk to me, and then got him to actually get to the point that I wanted to make, was that I don't know that your God exists, and because you define it with an entailment that everybody knows it's the case, you just needed a single example of somebody who doesn't know it's the case. Now, and also, that argument is beside, I don't even think it's a valid argument, right? Like, yes, it uses the right structure, but when you talk about knowledge, Malpass uses a really good example that you can know a certain mathematical axiom. It doesn't mean you know every derivation at which you could go further with, right? Like, it doesn't mean you're going to know everything that's entailed. You're not going to have knowledge of everything from that axiom. So it doesn't mean that when you have knowledge, you necessarily like understand the entailments of all that. So like if we actually looked at the argument from the right way, it fails that way, and it fails even if we accept his argument and apply a modus tollens. So for the fact, real fast, before I get on my WWE promo, the fact that Kafi, or whatever, however you say his name, thinks that was a attempt to troll when it was my attempt to get him to talk to me because he didn't want to talk to me and I had to pretend to be a fucking British guy, then you just don't understand the situation in which it.
Okay, I gotta say 3 different things. The first is this. Cafe, the problem here is that the way in which Darth phrases the argument, that is what is entailed.
Yeah,
I know it's not what he wants to say. And I don't think any of us would say that just not being aware of God means that God doesn't exist in general. It only follows from the terrible type of argument that Darth was trying to provide and how he phrased it. Secondly, Trinity apologetics. He says, have Craig on the show. It will be a bloodbath.
He won't.
He will destroy you.
He won't do it.
I would love to have him on the show because, again, there are theist philosophers that I respect, and I respect their approach. There is nothing about Craig that I find intimidating. Now, you say you just read, or you just don't read his scholarly work, you watch his beginner apologetics videos. How you would know what it is that we've read and haven't read, I don't know where you go about making that statement. I've read several of.
He's doing that because he probably saw a video that we did that was one of his Dr. Craig videos. But like, we're not going to go over an entire academic paper on the show for people because that's just not. We wouldn't get a big audience on that.
Yeah. I mean, but I have read his works and I've read things he's published. In fact, I've done that more than I've watched his videos. I just find it to be complete nonsense from start to finish. Sure. From his total failure of understanding cosmology to his so poor moral philosophy. I mean, he's stuck on, what's the term?
I mean, if you think that there's an entailment of objective morality to a God that has exception on objective morals, then you didn't even think for 2 seconds.
Craig is stuck on divine command theory a lot of the time, which is embarrassing. Which is
entailed under subjectivism, and he's making an argument for like there's a consensus, which you want to agree or not or think it matters. Divine command theory falls under subjectivism. It's just that it is subjectivism. And if you espouse divine command theory, but you want to say objective morals and duties exist, it's horseshit. Real fast, let me back up real fast so Kafi understands, just real quick. This is what Cease was saying. There's an entailment on how he defines it. Clearly, this is what I was saying, that I don't agree with the argument, but I'm using his argument against him. And if we use the actual correct form, we would attack premise 2, which is that you know it. So premise 1 is if Darth's God exists, you know it, right? There's an entailment that you know it, right? You know it. I'm sorry, it's supposed to be Darth's God exists. I affirmed the consequent there. So it is going to be the case. Let me just edit it so I don't do that. Darth's God exists. Affirm the consequent in my own stream.
Let me just while you do that, address again Trinity real quick. I wouldn't mind doing an episode just on that. Obviously, I don't want to get sidetracked at the moment, but we have some videos on Craig already. I would be happy to go more in depth with some what he says there. Sure. Again, I'm not going to pretend like I have all what is done memorized and all the like. I know that sounds familiar. I can't say that I remember what is said there. I know that I've read a lot of what is written, and none of it has been convincing. I wouldn't be opposed to going over it again and then doing a show, particularly on, sure. As long as I'm not, obviously we don't have the time to go over a whole book on
we barely we only could get through 2 clips of Sean McDowell. I mean, we talk too much. If Darth God exists, then you know it. Premise 2, Darth God exists, therefore you know it. So it's an entailment that you know that the God exists, right? That's how he defines the God. I made sure of this. How do I defend this? Because he has cited Romans 1:20 to me. He's also cited the fact that I suppress the belief. I've asked him explicitly. If you go watch the first video of me and him talking on Tom's video, if you didn't watch that video, then I'm even more mad that you're making judgments on this and not knowing the full context of why he won't talk to me. Go watch the first video. So the fact that he defines it that way, it's going to conclude that you know it, right? The God exists, you know it. Well, one man's modus ponens is another man's modus tollens. If Darth God exists, you know it. Well, if it's the case, I'm saying I don't know it, right? And he asks, how do you defend that premise? Knowledge is defined as justified true belief. Even we can take Gettier cases or not. But the fact that I don't have the belief just shows that I can't have knowledge. Now, only option that you have left there is to say I'm lying to you. If you want to take that burden of proof on, I've won again for a different reason. I've actually won in a better reason for the fact that your only option is just to claim insincerity. That is the most intellectually dishonest thing you can do. And then it just concludes naturally, if not Q, then not P, that Darth God doesn't exist. This is just modus tollens. If P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. So please, Kefi, look into propositional logic and understand his argument before you make yourself look like you don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so just to answer that, yes, it's a non sequitur outside of the framework which Darth himself put forth.
Agreed.
It follows entirely if you accept Darth's original premise, which is that if God exists, we know it. So it ceases to be a non sequitur once you accept Darth's original proposition.
It's like saying Flabagala exists. If blah 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 exists, you know it. And then I tell you, or then I ask you, and you go, I don't know what blah 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 is, and I try to do my best. You go, dude, I don't even know that's the case, nor do I believe in that proposition. But the entailment is that in order for the God to exist, or in the realm at which we are defining it as, everybody knows it. Well, if it's the case that a person doesn't know it, that God cannot exist because it is defined in an entailment. It's necessary for people to have knowledge of its existence. So of course I agree that makes no fucking sense. But I'm using it's a reductio. I'm using his argument against him. But and this is what I said earlier, even if we just take that aside and we go, okay, let's look at the knowledge part. Even the knowledge part, this is what Alex Malpass points out, is that there's no entailment of when you have knowledge about the other things that might be entailed. Similarly to mathematical axioms, doesn't mean that you know every derivation. And so this isn't, no, you literally aren't getting it. Like you're seriously not getting it. He defines it as everybody knowing it. He makes the mistake there. If it is the case that you don't know the God exists, it follows that God cannot exist. Anything you define as having a prerequisite, or after the fact that we just all know it, and then we find examples where that's not the case, we falsified the claim.
So the point is that, yes,
is.
The point is, Cafe, yes, it is fallacious. Darth's argument is fallacious. Well, all Mike did was reverse the argument against him to show how ridiculous it is. I would just kind of revisit the videos and look at it again, because
I'm gonna post. Look, I'm gonna post. Read this. Do yourself a favor, Kefi. Read this. When you understand it, you can come back and comment. But right now, I'm mad at you. No, I'm just kidding. I like Kefi. I'm just messing with them. But no, please read that, and hopefully that'll explain it to you better than we are.
So before we go on with the video, I just want to make one quick claim, or one quick statement. You said that you think that Darth realizes that he can respond to you. That's why he doesn't want to talk to you. I think you're giving him too much credit. I think he just literally, I think he's that stupid. And
maybe
he just doesn't want, because it's not like he understands what you're saying. He feels threatened by the fact that you run circles around him. He notices that you run circles around him, but he doesn't know why, because he's too stupid to understand why. And so
I think I called him stupid too. So,
well, I mean, look,
I don't typically
I don't want to waste time talking. I don't want to waste time talking about him. But I just think it's ironic that anytime someone interrupts him, he says, "Don't talk over me," and then when anybody else does it, he says, "We're having a conversation." So it's fine that I just step in every 2 seconds and don't let you actually finish a sentence. He is a complete coward. So anyway, having said that.
Yeah, Kafe's got to also understand that there's multiple recordings of me and him talking, and he's admitted this several times, and he's also admitted to me in Discord prior to that. So like to think that you have the full context when A, you weren't there, and B, you can virtually be there right now if you choose to see my point, then go do that.
Anyway, let's go back to whatever nonsense this guy's talking about.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Courage, principles of caring for posterity. Now the practice varies, but the principle.
Where were we at? Was it morality?
I forget.
Let's go back a little bit.
Said across cultures universally.
Yeah.
There's common principles that everybody knows and lives as if they're true. Principles of honesty, principles of courage, principles of caring for posterity. Now, the practice varies, but the principles are universal. So if there is an objective moral standard, and it seems to point towards God, I mean, after all, this points to a standard outside of human being.
Were you going to say he still doesn't get it?
I mean, it's just embarrassing. Like, nothing of this is pointing to a God whatsoever, not even remotely pointing to a God outside of this. Like, he's shown nothing, he has no defeater for why we could have shared, first of all, he hasn't even bothered to show, he's saying that the only difference is in the practice. No, that's not true. There are many cultures that don't have those same foundations, and so they don't operate on this universal foundation as far as beliefs are concerned. And secondary, or how do I say this? What I do believe is shared is when I talk about phenomenology, and that does not suggest the necessity of a God that can be explained entirely in naturalistic terms. So him just saying that it suggests that God has no basis, other than he just feels that that's the case.
Sorry, I dozed out on that one. No, sorry, I just
you're good.
Had to respond to that because Kafe's just still not getting it, and Kafe's way smarter than that. I want him to understand.
To a universal law that we're supposed to follow, there must be a God.
Yeah,
so
you've done nothing to show that.
It points towards a moral law giver. And last, I think
no.
First of all, the fact that there is a commonality of behavior doesn't point to there being a law. Second, doesn't point to that having been given by any kind of authority. You're just talking about some shared similarities. That doesn't suggest any kind of God whatsoever.
And welcome Kat into the I just want to give a huge shout out to Kat because Kat was one of the first viewers here, so shout out to Kat.
There's God is because the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Jesus claimed to be God in human flesh. He died on the cross. The tomb is empty. We have radical accounts of Jesus appearing to people.
How do we know the tomb is empty? Where do we get that information? From the Bible? Okay, so that begs the question. He died on the cross. How do we know he died on the cross? Because we got it from the Bible? Okay, that begs the question. Jesus claimed to be God in human flesh. That violates the law of identity. So now we have an actual logical contradiction. There are radical accounts of Jesus appearing live. That is testimony. There is testimony and the miracle of Fatima. There's testimony every day that people see ghosts. There's testimony that crystals heal people. It means jack shit, Sean, and you should know this.
And also, these are radical accounts. The 500, the count of the 500, is not a historical fact whatsoever. I mean, even Christian historians who are Christian acknowledge this. We have one source that talks about it, and even in the way it talks about it, The word "seen" there has many different translations. It doesn't only suggest seen physically. So even in the context of the one source that is not taken as a historical fact, there are other problems with it. So again, this is just ignoring history, ignoring what counts as evidence, ignoring the problems of testimony. It's just pure idiocy.
Well, hold on, man. What if let's just replace this. Mike claimed to be God in human flesh. Let's say I go and I die on a cross, and let's say my tomb is empty, and then people talk about me being alive. Just off that basis, is that good enough to prove my initial claim that I was God? Because I feel like that's so bad of evidence.
Again, the typical failure of a theist is not understanding what accounts for evidence. Like what makes a piece of evidence epistemically legitimate. Just because somebody says they saw something on its own isn't enough for anything. Certainly not in the context of phenomena that we don't have repeated and observed in a consistent manner. It's a different type of claim to say, I woke up and ate breakfast today, than to say I woke up and saw, a flying goblin in my room. Like, yeah, you can say that both, you experience both to your senses, but it's not the same kind of state. It's not the same kind of claim, and it doesn't require the same kind of evidence. So again, this is just not understanding what justification is.
And then our first.
Oh man, he got us. That's it. We're done for. He just totally proved Christianity.
Everybody has died in history for what they believed in. Some weren't even religious claims. The kamikaze died for nationalism. It doesn't prove the truth of nationalism. I mean, this is embarrassingly stupid.
Well, it's also embarrassingly stupid because we have no clue what the willingness of the witnesses were. We have no idea.
But let's assume, like, I want to give all the ammunition.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, it's funny you say that, because I think like 2 years ago when me and you were first getting more into I still know when you were getting into like debates with Vlad and stuff, like we had brought this point up always when we were in Discord. It was like, me and you would always say this phrase, would we not? Let's give them all the toys to play with, because it seems to be even better in your favor, to give you everything you need.
So again, forget the 500. Let's pretend it was 1,000, and let's pretend that 1,000 had multiple sources, not just the one, not just Paul's letter or whatever, but multiple sources pointing to Jesus having risen again. It wouldn't change the problem one bit, because of what we understand about psychology and the failure of testimony, and the way in which psychology can impact how we perceive things, and how wishful thinking impacts our senses of what we experience. People have died throughout history for conflicting and contradictory claims and beliefs. Christians have died for Christianity. Muslims have died for Islam.
Sure.
The kamikaze have died for beliefs that
people have died for homeopathic remedies, thinking that they would heal themselves, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, so we have examples of people who have died for their beliefs all throughout history, throughout all of time. In no way, shape, or form does this give even an ounce of credibility to the claim. It only shows that the person maybe really believed it. I don't have to say that they were pretending. Maybe they really believed it. Who gives a shit? It doesn't change anything.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's the same thing with someone who's a proponent for homeopathic remedies and dies. They really believed it, hence why they tried it, and then they ended up dying.
Yeah, who cares?
Witnesses were willing to die for this conviction. So here it is. The beginning of the universe points towards the beginner. The fine-tuning of the universe is best.
This we can clearly mark off, because the Big Bang does not assert that, and that's just a really poor understanding of cosmology and what it's saying to us. The fine tuning is, to me, it has two problems. One, I think it's an assertion that I'm not sure is substantiated in the way that people want it to be. Two, I don't know how you reconcile multiverse. Three, doesn't indicate, even if it is the case, that it has to be because of a god. I mean, that to me is like, if you think that's the only option left, it's a super high amount of special pleading, in my opinion.
All you do with fine tuning is saying that things are a certain way, and if they had been different, then the universe would have been different. That's the case for any kind of universe one can imagine. And if anything, there are actually aspects of the so-called fine tuning that go against theism. And I'm going to bring my brother on again to discuss that at some point in the near future.
Thank you for the
yes.
donation. We're doing pretty good, man, and more than I thought we'd ever do. We're making money talking about this. Wow, I didn't think that ever happened. Thank you, Larry. Anyway,
explained by a fine tuner.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah,
it's not best explained by that whatsoever.
Yeah, these are just very nonsense.
These are just claims.
Well, they're claims in either case. I don't know about the consequent being entailed at all by the antecedent, but
the DNA, the information, points towards an author of life. A moral law.
No, it's another assertion, another post hoc rationalization.
Let me just post this.
If we had the author of life, if we needed that, that would be in our predictions. We don't need that. There's kinds of fine tuning that have nothing to do with life. Sure, I think though that the theist is specifically just relegating it to life, though, because I mean they don't care about, they don't give a shit. Like a lot of
but that shows, but that exposes the hypocrisy. Like if there can be fine tuning in general that is not intentional, then there's no reason to assume that for life it would have to be different. But yeah, the DNA information doesn't point to an author whatsoever. That's just not understanding biology. Let's keep going.
Oh, whoops.
Points towards a moral lawgiver, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ tells us that God entered into human history. We have good reason to believe that God exists.
So
he's killing it on the music, isn't he? And really good choices.
That video was essentially not 5 good reasons why God exists, but 5 good reasons to be aware that Sean doesn't understand philosophy or science in any real meaningful sense. These are just the usual theist talking points that are just detached from the actual fields these conversations take place in. So, yeah, it's just really, really bad.
Oh, right. Let me bring that down. We're at the 2-hour mark. Holy crap. So yeah, I guess we can, yeah, it really did. So I guess we can get to some other clips here soon. If any, I don't know if there's a theist, Kefi, I don't know if you want to come on the show at some point. I'd like to have a conversation. But we're really wanting to get a lot more theists in, and we also really want to dive into some suggestions from the viewers on what kind of content you'd see. It really help us out on, if you become a Patreon, we're going to, add some little poll thing or suggestion box or something like that. We're kind of new at all this. We're still trying to figure out how a lot of all of it works. So bear with us. But if you guys really want to either help us, you can do so on Patreon, and then you can also get the benefit of suggesting shows for us. But yeah, Cease, did you want to kind of sum up anything or mention anything before we get off?
No, I will say, we have some clips left over that we can go through next time around. There's definitely, I want to go over the idealist conversation again and maybe have a part 2 to that. I definitely want to talk to you about consciousness in the near future.
Yeah, we got to do that. Max wants to get on that conversation as well. I don't know if we'll do that or if we'll do a part 2 with them or whatever, but he just went through his last bit of surgery that he needed. Right. And so now he's doing, I think he's doing a lot better. in that realm. I wanted to, I guess, say real fast to some people a lot in the comments I saw, they're like, J might need an event, or I like this energy. Yeah, I've definitely had some things go on, and I'm a little bit more fiery in that sense. But it's some things happen in a better sense. I was told earlier today that on Sunday I'll be hosting with Matt Dillahunty on Talk Heathen, which will be really cool. So I'm definitely a little pumped on that. I also did an AMA earlier, and people were really cool and nice and asking questions and felt very interested in what I had to say. And so in some aspects of my life that haven't gone so well, today has been cool in finding out that information and talking to some people that were fans of the content or Talk Heathen or things like that. And so I'm just a little pumped up a little bit more. I feel like I got a kick in my step. And so hopefully hopefully I can bring that to every show. So.
I was gonna say, it's a good contrast, because on the other hand, I'm like beyond tired right now. Like I'm barely.
Can I express to them that me and you, I'm just gonna say, me and you, we suffer a little bit in the tired realm of like, I have really bad insomnia. I stay up a lot. It's where I do a lot of my reading and research and stuff, because I just can't go to sleep. Is usually what, and Cease knows this, because I'll hit him up at 5 a.m, like, hey dude, I got this really thick thing, and he'll be up awake too, like responding to me. We're in this situation where it's like sometimes we'll get on the show, we want to do it, but if you see a difference in how I acted compared, probably one of those days where I'm just like fighting to stay awake. Today, not one of those days, and it's probably one of my favorite shows that we've done, because I felt like energetic. So
let me just address this real quick. He says, are you familiar with the objections to the correspondence theory of truth? Yeah, I would say yes, and I probably share some of those objections to a point. Now, again, I do think that our language and our experience corresponds to reality to a degree. I think it would be silly to think that it wouldn't. I just think that the degree is ambiguous. And I think if anything, it's one reason why my understanding of idealism, one reason why I reject it, is because it seems to think, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but when we talked, you seem to be suggesting that there isn't this gap between the person and what is out there, and I think that there is. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can. I don't know if you want to. I think that'd be a good episode to actually do. Is I know I'm working on a script for internalism and externalism of justification. We've said this in the past. I want to really shift my focus, and I don't want this to like sound like I'm shifting the focus off the lives or anything, because we'll always do that. It's just clearly like anything we can do whenever we're both available to do it. But I really want to shift my focus to doing some narration videos, whether they're 3 to 10 minute long, just on philosophical topics, religious topics, whatever it might be. And I'm curious on what you guys think about that, if you would like that type of format. It's not going to switch what we do by any means, but I am curious on what you guys would think. For some reason, I'm nervous in thinking that the lives will just always do better than that, and that I'll be chasing that in some way, because I think that the fan base that we have likes the live discussions. But just let me know if that's something you like as well. Yeah, just give us a email, axiomsontrial@gmail, or become a Patreon, or just message us in the chat or something. And I don't know. I think that's all for me. Cease, did you want to? Actually, one more thing. Tune in to Talk Eden this Sunday. Doing it with Matt Dillahunty, and then the 18th of July, I'll be doing an Atheist Experience with Matt. So get a double dose this month. Yeah, go check that out. Anything from you, Cease?
No, I'll just say what I always say, which is, I'm very grateful that we get to do this, and that it seems that people are enjoying it, and that we're growing in numbers and support. I'm wanting to, at some point, do some breakdowns of philosophy that I find interesting, more so than debunking theology. Obviously, we'll continue to do that But there are, I think, some topics that I think are, at least to me, interesting that I want to bring on board. Outside of that, no, hopefully we get to do another show soon.
And I agree with this statement.
Yeah, for real. I would love to.
I want to get Shannon Q back on because that episode we did was an episode we did when I was in that tired state of like, God, I love Shannon. And I was like, I remember doing that, being like, I slept for like 2 hours and I don't feel like I did the best job I could on that. So definitely I'm going to have Shannon come back and say, hey, I fucked up. I didn't sleep well that night and I don't feel like I did justice on the show. And we'll get Biddy back on too because Biddy's been doing the line and getting out there herself, so we'll definitely do that. Maybe I can talk to Arden as well. Maybe we can get Arden on.
So that's something I really would love. I would love to have a conversation with her. Yeah. So let me know what you find out of that.
Yeah, Katie, Arden. Maybe I know this is maybe outside the realm, but I want to reach out to any of the past hosts, like I don't know what Tracy Harris is doing, or anybody that was a former host or something like that. But I'd love to have any of those people. Jenna Belk, yep, Jenna Belk, the other Jen. So yeah, we'll try. I'll try to reach out. That's actually, Ada, I'm glad you said that because I actually have a lot in mind. But yeah, anyway, guys, we and gals and anyone else, we just want to say that we love you. We love the support, and we'll probably be back, I think, Thursday. I know I'm good Thursday. I don't know about you, Cease, but tomorrow I'm no good. So maybe Cease might do a surprise show tomorrow if he's good tomorrow. I will not be able to make it, but by Thursday we should have another show. So till then, peace out. See you guys later.
One more thing before you click in that I just remembered. Anybody cares?
Sorry, I had to do it.
Not that anybody cares, but probably don't care. But Italy is in the final of the Euro 2020.
Yeah,
I am very excited about that.
They knocked out Spain, right? Because that was my boys' team.
They knocked them out today. That game was painful to watch, but they won at penalty shootouts or whatever. So
yeah, for those that don't know, Cease is Italian, and my mom's Italian, so we're two hairy Italian men.
That's right. So yeah, I don't know why I just felt the need to say that, but
definitely, I share the same. I get two teams. My dad's from England, my mom's from Italy, so boom, I get two teams to root for. So when one gets knocked out, I just switch to that. So
perfect.
All right, guys, much love and peace out.